Hi everyone, I would like to welcome you to our first SABAP 2 webinar. We hope that this will be the first of many SABAP 2 webinars. Atlas has told us that they would like to receive more feedback about SABAP 2, for example, how we use the data, how the project is managed, and also the future of the project. So this webinar is an attempt to answer some of these questions. In the past, we host regional workshops. However, we decided to give the webinar format a try. There's many advantages. The most important that we can reach a large number of people relatively easily, also outside of the large metropolitan area. So based on the attendance today and feedback received, we will decide if we'll host more webinars in the future. But I see we've already got 100 people attending today, so it seems that box has been ticked. We have done everything possible to ensure that this webinar will run smoothly, but please be patient with us. This is our first attempt to host a webinar, so we are learning as we go along. You will see in front of you the first page of a Microsoft PowerPoint presentation. The screen will change as we move the slides forward. You should also see a chat room. Please use the chat room to ask questions or give comments. Sandra Rose will take note of your questions and if possible answer some of them. She will also share links and other resources. You're also welcome to post your name, where you're from and why you enjoy atlasing. So you're welcome to use the chat room to give feedback and to provide comments. There are only two agenda items today. The first agenda item is a short presentation by Professor Peter Ryan about the current status of SABAP 2 and its management. And in the panel discussion, we will ask the panelists some questions as submitted to us by Atlases. So let's immediately begin and ask Peter to talk to us about the current status and management of SABAP 2. Peter is the director of the Fitzpatrick Institute of African Ornithology, and he also chairs the SABAP 2 steering committee.
And that was really driven by the fact that Les Underhill was retiring, and unfortunately the ADU, being just a research unit within the university, had no sort of formal existence beyond Les's role. And I mean, we all admire Les enormously, and he's played a huge role in driving SABAP and SABAP 2, and we all owe him a huge debt of gratitude for that contribution. But the Dean asked the FITS to try to assist to continue some of the really important databases that Les had set up through the ADU. And so that's why the FITS got involved. Obviously, we really appreciate this opportunity because it's such an amazing project. So if we can just move on to the next slide, Ernst. The sort of crisis that precipitated the move was largely financial. The ADU was struggling to find the funding to sustain the core activities of SABAP. So even though the biggest financial contribution by far is by the atlases actually going out and collecting the data, there are some core activities that need to be sustained within just keeping the databases and the management tools operational, and that has cost a fair amount of money each year. And we were fortunate to be able to secure some funding through the sort of a joint collaboration between SANBI and the Department of Environment Affairs, which carries us through until not 2019 but 2020. So we have guaranteed funding until March 2020, and we are confident that we'll be able to continue SABAP beyond that time, because it's just such an enormously important project for South Africa and for the broader African region. And I think in the next African Bird Life, there'll be an interesting article on the BirdMap project, which is trying to grow the bird atlas beyond the boundaries of South and Southern Africa to try to map birds across the whole continent. So just if we can go on to the next slide, Ernst. With the transition from the ADU to the FITS, really reinvigorated the steering committee for SABAP2. So SABAP2 is really a joint venture between the University of Cape Town through the Fitzpatrick Institute and Res Altweg's Statistical Ecology Unit SEEK, SANBI, the South African National Biodiversity Institute, and BirdLife South Africa. And so all of those partners are well represented on the steering committee, and we meet every few months to discuss progress. And then beyond the steering committee, we have the sort of day-to-day team, which Ernst Retief has very kindly accepted over and above his responsibilities within BirdLife. Michael Brooks is the primary person responsible for database management. So he's based now in the FITS. He was at ADU for years while he actually set up the SABAP system. And then Sanyu Rose, who many of you will know from her position as a Saffring intern, has taken on the project communications role. So she's responsible for all the social media and a lot of the other communications around SABAP. So that's the sort of team in terms of the day-to-day running, but I really want to also thank the enormous contribution of the regional Atlas committees. So one of the really crucial aspects of atlasing is having quality control of the data. We rely on a huge diversity of people to contribute data, and obviously we need to make sure that those data are sensible and reliable. And the best way we can do that is to use the old SABAP distributional data to decide whether or not a record is unusual enough to flag. And if it is flagged, it triggers a manual evaluation process. And so we've automated the process as much as possible, but ultimately it comes down to all of those out of range records or range extensions come down to somebody has to look at those records, send out the actual sending out of the out of range form is an automated process, but somebody has to then sit and decide, is this a substantiated record that can be accepted? And so the people listed here for each of the provinces give up a huge amount of their time when they could be out bird watching or doing other more useful things perhaps. So we're really very grateful to them. In terms of progress, Michael just pulled together some stats here to show you the progress of the Atlas over the period since SABAP2 started a little over a decade ago. And we can see in the last 4 or 5 years, the massive growth that's been attributed to BirdLasser. BirdLasser has really made the Atlas grow enormously. This is just the number of records, so it's not the number of cards, it's the number of species records over time. And one of the things that we'll be talking about in the rest of the webinar is that big gap that's developed between full protocol records and all submissions. And obviously all submissions are really useful, but they're not as useful as full protocol. So we're really very keen to try to bring those two lines closer together. It's a bit like watching a South African cricket score diverging from the opposition, and not something that we want to see continue for too much longer. And then this was just another summary stat just to show the growth of the sort of SABAP family of atlas effort throughout the African continent. So South Africa with 17 million records is well ahead of everyone else, almost 18 million records. But the project does run in other countries. It's been a little bit slow on the uptake, but some countries like Kenya and Nigeria are really taking off now, thanks to initiatives elsewhere. But all of these projects rely on the SABAP data management system. So we're not only running the Southern African Bird Atlas project, but also really providing the framework for atlasing throughout the whole of the continent. And I think that's more than enough from me in terms of where the project's going. If anybody has any specific questions, please type them into the chat room and we'll try to get back to you. But for now, I'd just like to thank all the atlases, because the project is only as strong as the people out there doing the work. And really, it's testament to you guys that we've managed to get as far as we have, as quickly as we have. If you compare what we've done in the last decade for SABAP2 to what was done in SABAP1, it's just amazing more we've managed to do in the last 10 years or so. So thank you so much, and I'll pass back to Ernst.
Thank you, Peter. Much appreciated. I would just like to ask everybody to switch off video. It interferes with our broadband and so on. So if you can, just please switch off video on your side. All right, let's move on to the panel discussion. So we've got 4 panelists today. First, myself from BirdLife South Africa. Then you all should know Michael Brooks, as Peter indicates, responsible for our IT management. Then we are very honored to have Professor S. Altweg. He's based at UCT and he uses SABAP2 data a lot and also publicizes in academic papers. And then I think you all know Henk Nel, or Mr. Birdlasser as we know him. So Henk is going to answer a few questions on Birdlasser. So Michael, if we immediately can go to you, you launched a new SABAP2 website earlier in the year. I think it's a vast improvement on the old site, but please explain to us why we needed a new website. And can you also maybe list some of the new features? And some users also indicated that the website is a bit slow. Why should this be? Over to you.
Yeah, hi, evening. Why did we have a new website? What happens is the last website was built a good few years ago, and it used technology that in the meantime has become rather outdated. Now that we are going to be upgrading our servers, the old websites just simply will no longer run on the new technology, on the new servers. So we have updated now to the newest secure web technology, which led us to build a new website. The other factor was Google has decided they are going to be charging for Google Maps from now on. And we just used too much. We used it, our website is too popular. So what ended up happening, we would have had to pay for those websites to use the map. Because we don't have running cost funding, that was just prohibitive. So the new website uses 5 times less mapping, but still displays the same amount of data. So those are the 2 big reasons that we have the new website. The third one was, as Peter said, we're rolling out throughout Africa on the BirdMap project. In the previous incantation of the website, I would have had to manage each country's web portal separately. So what that means is I would end up having 9 or 10 different websites to try and manage individually. The new design allows me to use one single code base for each country. So the only thing that changes is the URL, and that will change the website to customize it to their site. But the code behind it is exactly the same code. So now I only have to manage one code base, not now. Yeah. A few new features on the website. What we've done is simplified the website quite considerably in the number of pages we have, but we have made far more data available to the public. You may now download any data you want off the website, from summary data to raw data to pre-built GIS level data for the GIA practitioners. You can now link your GIS software directly to the web database and pull data to your maps. There are a few things that we're still going to be adding. We have a few requests for the 3x3 pentad grid to come back. That will be coming in, as well as the quarter-degree grid cell option that's been brought back. The biggest thing we're going to be adding onto the site is the online vetting system. So instead of getting a out-of-range form in the email, you'll get a link to go and fill in a form online. How this helps us is it lets us keep a record in the database of your discussions and the vetting process. And that way we can revisit it whenever we need to. Okay. One of the drawbacks of having all the data showing on the map, that is the web pages do load a bit slowly. Like I said, because of the way that the website is designed, if you go to a coverage map, it loads the coverage map and all of the data required for that coverage map at the same time. So the species list, the card list, the observer list, all of that is loaded at once. Previously, you would load that on 5 different pages. So that time would be 5 times shorter. Now, it takes a bit longer to load it, but you only have to load it once, The data is fully available to you. We've also made all of the tables sortable so that it's easy to move around the data, it's easy to export the data, use the data as needed. And that's pretty much everything about the website at the moment.
Michael, yes,
Yeah.
thank you very much. I appreciate it. I've learned in the last few months how much work you put into the website, so we really appreciate it. So thank you very much for that. Let's move on to Res Altweg. Res, so question to you. One of the nice aspects of SABIT 2 is that atlases can decide how much time they want to spend on atlasing, when they want to atlas, etc. But atlases did ask us why, if there are certain cards which are more valuable than others. For instance, are a lot of 2 to 3 hour cards more valuable than, for instance, one card compiled over a number of hours or even days. Such cards might contain a more complete species list than shorter cards and so on. So is the one more valuable to the other? What do we need for SABIT 2? And can you also discuss the value of ad hoc vs full protocol cards?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. Yes, that's a very good question about the trade-offs. How long should you atlas, or should you try to collect rather more lists? And to answer that question, I just want you to imagine when you go onto the website, SABIT website, and you look at a species distribution, you're definitely going to see some pentouts where you know the species occurs, but it hasn't been recorded there yet. And those are what we call false absences. So essentially the species has been overlooked there. And we've got statistical methods to deal with those false absences. So essentially we are calculating a detection probability. But for that we need to, the methods just work better if we've got a decent probability of finding the species when we go there. And that's really where the 2 hour minimum comes from. So we want to be reasonably sure that you've had a good chance of seeing at least a common species. Now, different species obviously have a different detection probability, and you can stay in a place for days and still find more species. So some of the rarer species you will have to search much harder before you find them. So now that's why it's also valuable to have some cards that have been collected over days and really try to visit every single habitat in the pentat and every corner. Now, to answer the question, it depends a little bit. So if you're atlasing in a place that already has a lot of data, you already have a lot of cards from, then I think it would be really valuable to spend several days and really try to find those rare species as well, so that we get a little bit of variation in the effort that goes into each atlas list. But if you're going to a place where we have very little data, then it would be more valuable if you spend time in a number of different pentats and just do the 2 hour minimum and collect as many cards as you can. So it really depends a little bit on how much data we already have, but both types of cards are really valuable. Then a little bit about the ad hoc atlas cards. So there, obviously you're spending less time, so you might be less likely to even see some of the common species, especially if you also have a very small footprint, like if you're, for example, only atlasing in one corner. Now, those cards are still potentially useful or valuable. So we use them in some analyses, but in most analyses we don't at the moment use those. But sometimes you get to a place and you just don't have 2 hours, and then I think it would still be valuable if you send us the list that you're making, even if it's just half an hour or an hour, if it's in addition to what you're doing with the full protocol list. So very clearly we would like you to prioritize full protocol lists, but if you can't do a full protocol list, then we are also grateful if you submit your ad hoc list.
All right, Res, thanks for that. All right, let's move on to Henk. Henk, are you there? Sorry, I just struggling to unmute Henk for some reason. Ink?
Yes, can you hear me?
There you can hear me now. All right, thanks, Ink. All right, so we've got lots of questions about BirdLasser. But for Ink, first of all, I want to thank you on behalf of all atlases for what you've done for SABAP 2 and especially developing of the app. I think everybody will agree that logging and submission of data is now so easy. So thank you very much for all your hard work and also to the rest of your team. So the first question is about the relationship between BirdLasser and SABAP 2. Some users of BirdLasser believe that when they log data on BirdLasser, their data are automatically submitted to SABAP 2, but that is not correct. Can you maybe explain?
Yeah, and thanks for the kind words, Ernst. So to answer that question, it's important to note that BirdLasser is a product developed by a company that's privately owned. It has no affiliation with any other company or entity within the South African birding community. Having said that, when we started off in early 2013, I did have significant interactions with Professor Les Underhill and Michael Brooks to assist us with the Atlas rules engine or the algorithm within the app. And other than that, there's no relationship. I always explain to people, best way to understand it is that with BirdLasser, you can atlas using the app and you can submit your data to SABAP, and you can also contribute to other conservation and research causes. If you go into the app, you'll see there's a causes and your data there will be sent to them. Also take part in challenges and events. Or you can do nothing. You can just use the app and log stuff, and that data will just be on your phone. Obviously, it gets backed up to your service, but that information gets shared with no other entity. On the other side of the spectrum, you can contribute to SABAP 2 by using BirdLasser, or not. You can still be an atlas and contribute without having BirdLasser play a part in your life. Just making it clear that there's no relationship between the two.
All right, thank you. And people need to follow a specific submission process to get the data into SABAP 2, correct?
Yes, we're going to talk about it now.
Yeah. Yeah, you're quite correct. So yeah, the next question is then, one of the nice features of the app is that it keeps tracks of the time atlas. Can you please explain to us how the app, sorry,
And so I'm just going to go back to the first slide.
Yeah.
Where you said, do I need to submit my data? Yeah, so just there, if you are a registered atlaser, so assuming that you've gone into the SABAP or BirdMap website and you've been allocated your observer number, then you will be using BirdLasser to atlas. So you explicitly need to submit your data to SABAP 2. It is also worth noting that if atlasing is the objective, that's the reason why you're using the app, then the app needs to be configured accordingly by switching atlasing on. So in the app, the first time you download and you use it, atlasing is not on. The app does not know you are meant to be atlasing. So you need to switch it on. You can switch it on per trip card, or you can switch it on in the settings, and every trip card you create will automatically be in atlasing mode. And then once you're done, looking at the picture there in the slide, you'll see the pentat numbers there. Once you're done, you've done your hopefully 5 days to get your full protocol card. You have to go and explicitly submit it. It's also worth noting that when submitting it, you need to decide whether it was a full protocol or a ad hoc protocol.
All right, I think we're going to come to that now. So I see also in the chat room, people have already asked about the timing issue. So one of the nice features of the app is that it keeps track of the time atlas. Can you maybe explain to us how the app do this, and also why we might get a warning that we've atlas less than 2 hours when we've actually atlas more than 2 hours?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So there are 2 timers. Normally when you record, you're using the app and you're recording, there's a little timer at the bottom. I call that time spent in Pentad. So it's not the time you spent atlasing. And the second timer is the new timer we introduced about a year ago. That one is time atlas. So here's the difference. By the time you get to the screen where it says submit to BirdMap and you see that timer, atlas time, it is assumed that you are done atlasing. And it's important because the way this algorithm works, it's assuming that you have finished your atlasing exercise. Just saying that because if you, whilst you atlas and you keep on looking at, the time will change significantly every time you look, because it depends on what you've logged and when you've last logged something. So to get to the point, how's the time calculated? So it starts the timer when the first record is logged, and it stops when the last record is logged, except that it will exclude excessive dead times. In other words, times where nothing was logged. Okay? It will also stop if you've parked a card. Now, what I mean by excessive dead time, and this is the key variable in this equation, that considers two factors: the time and duration during which the records have been logged, and if the app has been used. So, as a general rule of thumb, what I tell people is, if you are atlasing, log records, even if it is a duplicate. As you know, the app will ignore duplicates. The app will only send your first record of a specific species to SubUp. So just keep on logging, thereby telling the app that I am busy atlasing. You need to consider the fact that you could be busy atlasing. You're sitting in a bird hide. Somebody comes along and you guys start chatting for half an hour or 40 minutes. What is the difference between that and you looking out of the bird hide and just not seeing any new species, therefore not logging it? There's no ways for the app to tell whether you are indeed still birding. So what you need to do is, if you see something, log it. And my rule is roughly log something at least every half an hour, even if it's just one single species. It's also applicable when you drive from the one spot, moving on to another different habitat. Whilst you're driving, you might see again a long-tailed widowbird. You've already logged it. I know it. Just log it again. Just tell the app, I am still birding. Obviously, the other side of the coin is, if you are not birding, don't log anything, and more so, put the app in a park state, park that card, and now have your chat or have your cup of coffee. When you're done, unpark it and continue atlasing.
All right, Henk, thank you. I think that will clarify the issue for a lot of people. Thank you very much. And then the last question about BirdLasser. For those people who don't use BirdLasser a lot, how can Atlas keep track of its movements in a pen pad? And will the app keep track of your time as you move in and out of a pen pad? I think you've answered the last bit already, but just explain about the blue dot and how people can keep track of the movement in a pen pad.
Okay, so first of all, you can switch your view while you're in a trip between a list view and a map view. As per your demo there, that's the map view. There's a little toggle switch in the top right-hand corner. If you go to the map, what's important to notice that if you're on an Android phone, that is Google Maps. It works just like Google Maps. So that little target icon in the top right-hand corner, if you tap on that, the screen will reposition, and in the center will be a little blue dot. That is where you are. On Apple, it's a bit different. Apple uses Apple Maps. They don't have this feature of clicking somewhere and it brings you, centers you in the screen. What I typically do is I zoom out and get a bird's eye view of this map, and then somewhere you'll see the blue dot. I'll scroll there and then zoom in. It's just a different way of getting there. But the important thing to note is that little blue dot is you.
That's right. It cannot be easier. You just follow the dot, and you can follow the roads and see exactly where you go. And so that is really, really one of the nice things about BirdLasser. You don't need the GPS like in the old days or maps. You can just use your BirdLasser map. Thank you very much.
And can I just add one thing? It's just to keep the timer as accurate as possible, and knowing when you move across into pentads, is to have the app open and in the foreground while you cross over into another pentad. So for the app, again, to notify the app, listen here, I'm leaving this pentad, stop its timer, I'm moving into the next pentad, please start its timer.
Great. All right, Henk, I think really maybe our next webinar should be about BirdLasser alone. I think there's a lot more questions, but we will chat about that. All right, so a question to myself about regional and national rarities. So as most of you know, that we, in addition to out of range form, also receive regional and national rarity forms. So a regional rarity is when you have seen an unusual species in a province, while a national rarity is a vagrant somewhere in South Africa. So Atlas have complained that they receive too many regional rarity forms, especially for common species, and also that they don't receive any feedback on national rarity forms. So we've looked into these issues, and I'm glad to report today that we've resolved some of these issues. First of all the provincial regional Atlas committees scrutinized the regional provincial species list, and they've proposed numerous changes to the list, so all those common species will now be removed. I've got now the task to combine all these lists in one spreadsheet, and I will then forward it to Michael, and Michael will then import the combined spreadsheet into the vetting system. So I hope to do all of this in the next week or so, and that hopefully we can have the new species, the regional rarity species list ready and in the system in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We will then after that continue to monitor the situation, and if needed, we will then make additional changes. But hopefully we can resolve this issue quite quickly. Regarding national rarities, so we acknowledge that there was a lot of issues about the education of national rarities, but the National Rarities Committee in the last few months relooked the vetting procedures, and they've designed some new vetting procedures. They also launched a new National Rarities website. I see Sanjay already copied the link in the chat box. So please go and have a look there. So I've been informed that all the national rarity submissions up to April 2018 have now been vetted. All these submissions up to April 2018 have now been vetted. And the NRC have sent through adjudications for a backlog of outstanding records, and the final decisions should be sent to the administrator by the end of this week, I've been told by Melissa Whitecross. These will then be vetted by the end of June, and that will then also post it to the new website. So please check out the new website, see if your records have been vetted, and if not, please then either resubmit your submissions to rarities@birdlife.org.za, rarities@birdlife.org.za, and just make sure that they do receive your submissions. They've also now got a new submission method through WhatsApp, so check the website for more details. So there's different ways that you now can submit your data. So I sincerely hope that these issues surrounding national regional rarities will now be resolved. And, but please let us know if you still experience any issues, and we will then look into that. All right, so let's move on. We're going back to Res. Just a moment. I just need to unmute Res. All right, Res, back to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So, Res, the last question to you. So from the first day that I've been involved with SAVAP 2, people moaned and groaned about out-of-range forms, and people saw it as a form of criticism. Some people even think there's somebody in Cape Town sitting there and telling them they can't bird and their records are incorrectly. They also feel intimidated by it, but that should not be so correct. Can you maybe explain to us what's the importance of out-of-range forms and why we have it?
Yes. Yeah, so believe me, every time I get an out-of-range form, I get this sinking feeling, and so I know very well where this question is coming from. And actually, maybe to start with a little story. So we've got the pentad in Namibia that we often go to in Atlas. And I remember the very first time we submitted an Atlas list from that pentad, about 3/4 of the species were out of range. So it was quite a lot of work to sort that out. But why is it important? So I mentioned the false negatives earlier. So we've got the opposite problem of false positives, where a species gets reported from a place where it actually doesn't occur, like for example, might be a misidentification or something. Now, or just a mistake. Now, those issues are a little bit harder to account for in the analysis, and that's why we really try to minimize those problems. And you know, it has happened to me a number of times that I just accidentally like clicked on the wrong button or something, and you know, submitted an American gallinule instead of a purple gallinule or something like that. And I was really glad that the out of range form picked up that this was an error, and I was able to correct it. So these out of range forms are really important to minimize the problem that we might be getting records in the database of birds in places where they actually don't occur. So that's why this is really important. It adds to the quality of the data set. Now, obviously, if you don't fill in your range out of range forms, then that record will be pending and we won't be able to use it in the analysis. It's really important that you fill these forms in so that the record can get accepted and we know that the species occurs there. And we've seen a lot of range changes between SABAP 1 and SABAP 2. And so one stage at the out of range process is that it compares it to SABAP 1 data. And like, for example, at the beginning of the project, I'm sure a lot of you got out of range record cards or hardidars, and they are very hard to misidentify. But it's just because the hardidars have shifted their range so much between the two Atlas projects. Yeah, so that's so the value in these records is really that once they've been vetted and accepted, we can use them in the analyses.
Yes, thank Grace. That is excellent. I also tell people that they must be actually proud when they receive an ORA form for a species that they've identified correctly, for they would be the first person in that pentat or area who have seen that species. So, so it's not a criticism. It is just the computer in Cape Town who does the vetting doesn't know the species doesn't occur there. And so it's really important then to complete that form and submit it. All right, that brings us to the end of our short panel discussion. So I would invite everybody to regularly visit our SABAP 2 website. As Michael indicated, there's regular updates and new things he adds, so please visit it. Then we've also created a new email address, sabap2@birdlife.org.za. This email address, all the emails to this email address comes to me, Sanjo, and Michael. So between the three of us, we will always try to respond to the emails as soon as possible. So if you have any queries, please use this email address. Then I would also like to remind you that we've got a Facebook group. So I know not all of you are fans of Facebook, but it's a really great tool for us to communicate with atlases. And we also invite you to come and tell your atlasing stories on Facebook. The atlasing community is a close-knit community, and it would be nice to learn from each other and share some of our experiences and so on. So please come and post your photos and stories on Facebook. And as I said, we also use it to share some information about SABAP 2. So that then brings us to the end of this short first SABAP 2 webinar. It seems to me it went quite well. I'm quite amazed about the number of people who have attended. I'm going to keep this webinar open for another 10 minutes or so. So please let us know what you think about the webinar, our first attempt. If you think there's value in it, as I said, the next one we thought might be one just about birdlasser. The next one after that can be a discussion with people like Res and others who uses the data, people from BirdLife of Africa who use it for conservation purposes. So there's all sort of webinars that we can have. So please let us know if you think if it will be of value, and if you think we should go ahead with that. You can also, if you don't want to post in the chat room, you can send us email to sabap2@birdlife.org.za. So thank you very much. That is then the end of our webinar. Enjoy the rest of the evening and enjoy your atlasing. Thank you.
Thanks, Ernst.